Resting on the Giza Plateau, with three majestic pyramids rising in the background, the Great Sphinx lies gazing east toward the rising sun. Mysterious Sphinx of Giza. What's mysterious about it?
The most famous desert on Earth may have been wearing its secret on its sleeve all along. For thousands of years, we've looked at the Great Sphinx of Giza and assumed it stood completely alone. But a group of scientists just aimed powerful space satellites at the sand, and the data they sent back is causing absolute chaos. They didn't just find an empty cave, they found signs of a ghost sphinx. Are we about to rewrite history, or is the desert playing a big trick on us? The space radar bombshell. For years, the world believed Egypt's biggest mystery had already been uncovered. The Giza Plateau has been scrutinized for the longest. Archaeologists have walked across it, measured it, mapped it, and examined almost every visible stone. Because of this, it is easy to think there is nothing new left to find. The Sphinx is one of the most famous monuments on Earth. It stretches nearly 240 feet across the desert and was carved directly from the limestone beneath it. For thousands of years, it has faced the eastern horizon, watching the sun rise over Egypt every morning. It was already ancient when many of the world's most famous cities did not even exist. Empires rose and fell around it. Kings came and went. Entire civilizations changed, yet the Sphinx remained exactly where it was, silently watching history unfold. But here is the thing. For years, everyone has looked at the same picture of the Egyptian desert and believed a lie. We see the pictures in travel guides and videos showing three giant pyramids and one single Great Sphinx sitting in the sand. It looks like a finished puzzle. History books even tell us that this is exactly how the ancient kings wanted it to look. But a brand new discovery made from outer space has just shattered this old story, revealing a huge secret sitting right in front of millions of tourists. Now, everything changed when an Italian expert named Filippo Biondi decided to stop looking at Egypt with just the human eye. And to do this, his team didn't use shovels or dig up the dirt. Instead, they acquired highly sensitive, dual-use defense data and aimed a technology called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography straight down at the Giza Plateau. This machine works like a medical X-ray machine from hundreds of miles above the Earth, measuring microscopic micro-vibrations in the desert floor. By analyzing how these invisible energy beams bounced back, their computers did something completely amazing. They digitally wiped away thousands of years of heavy desert sand, looking through the deep dunes as if they were made of clear glass. And what appeared on the computer screens completely left the whole research team speechless. Just a short distance away from the pyramids, buried under a huge pile of sand as tall as a 10-story apartment building, the radar found something mysterious. It did not hit natural rock. Instead, it drew a highly organized underground world filled with sharp corners, deep vertical shafts plunging into the earth, and large hollow rooms connected by straight tunnels. Now, nature does not make perfectly straight tunnels or sharp 90-degree corners under the ground. It was a clear sign of an advanced ancient building hidden in total darkness. And that's not all. What really stunned the scientists was when they compared this new underground map with the known secret tunnels hidden beneath the real Sphinx that we can see today. The two maps matched with unbelievable precision. This buried underground network perfectly mirrors the hidden rooms located under the visible statue. The space radar did not just find a random set of old ruins. It found the exact physical blueprint of a ghost twin. The data suggests that the Egyptian landscape we all know is actually not complete. The classic postcard view has been missing its other half this entire time, and a second identical statue has been waiting silently under a mountain of dirt right next to the pyramids. This discovery is causing a stir among scientists because proving the existence of a twin sphinx means rewriting everything we know about ancient history. But before we look at what may be hiding beneath that giant mound of sand, we need to talk about a strange clue that has been sitting at Giza since the age of the pharaohs. The law of the twin guardians. For a long time, the Giza Plateau has looked simple to the modern eye. 3 pyramids rising from the desert, one great sphinx watching over them. Most people see it as a finished picture, something already fully understood. But when you step into the way the ancient Egyptians thought, this simple picture starts to feel like it has a missing piece. You see, in ancient Egypt, building was never just about stacking stones. It was tied to a belief system called Ma'at, which focused on balance, order, and harmony. They believed everything in the universe had to stay in balance for life to continue properly. If this balance broke, they believed chaos would follow. This idea shaped how they built almost everything. Because of this belief, they often built in pairs. Important structures were rarely made alone. If one pillar stood on one side of a temple entrance, then another pillar would stand on the other side. If one symbol represented a force in nature, another symbol would often be placed beside it to complete the idea. Everything important was meant to have its match. Now, if you look at Giza through that lens, something feels slightly off, because there are 3 huge pyramids all carefully aligned like they were planned with precision, yet only one great sphinx sits in front of them, standing alone as a single guardian facing the desert, with no visible partner beside it. Today, this might not seem strange, but if you take a minute to think about how the ancient Egyptian really worked, balance and symmetry were everything. So a monument of this importance would rarely feel incomplete. And that is why the image of just one sphinx almost feels like you are only seeing half of a larger design, like a doorway built with only one side still standing. If balance was so important to them, why would they leave one of the most powerful symbols of protection standing alone? For many years, historians gave it a very simple explanation. They said the Sphinx was carved from a natural rock formation that already existed in the ground. According to them, it was not part of a larger paired design. It was just a creative use of what nature provided at the time. But the new radar findings are bringing a different idea into the conversation. Some of these shapes uncovered appeared to line up in a way that suggested balance across the site, almost like one side was reflecting the other. This means the Sphinx may not be alone at all. It could be positioned on one side of a much larger design, while a massive hidden structure lies on the opposite side, buried under layers of sand. Together, they would form a balanced layout, matching the ancient Egyptian rule of symmetry. This is where the story becomes even more interesting. If that hidden structure is truly part of the original design, then the builders were not breaking their rules. They were following them perfectly. A guardian on one side, a matching form on the other, a design built on balance, even across the desert itself. And this leads to the biggest question of all. If this twin structure was really meant to exist, where is the proof that it was planned? Did the ancient builders leave behind a clue strong enough to survive thousands of years of wind and sand? The Prince's Forgotten Map. If you want to find the earliest hint that something might be missing from the Giza Plateau, you do not actually need any advanced technology or modern scanning tools. In fact, the clue is sitting in plain sight. You just have to walk right up to the Great Sphinx and pay attention to what is directly in front of it. When you stand between the massive stone paws of the Sphinx, the ground beneath you is not just sand or space. You are standing over a huge slab of red granite that rises more than 11 feet tall. This is what historians call the Dream Stele, and it is one of the most important carved records left at the site. It is basically an ancient story carved into stone, placed right at the heart of one of Egypt's most mysterious monuments. And the story it tells sounds almost like something out of a royal legend mixed with a strange dream. Long before he became pharaoh, a young prince named Thutmose IV was said to be out in the desert on a hunting trip. The heat was intense, the kind that drains your strength without warning. At some point, he grew exhausted and decided to rest in the shade of the Sphinx. But at that time, the statue was not fully visible. It was buried deep in sand, with only the head rising above the surface like a forgotten watchman. While he slept there, something unusual is said to have happened. According to the carving, the Sphinx appeared to him in a dream, not just as a statue, but as a living voice. It spoke to him as a god would speak to a chosen person, And in that dream, it offered him a deal. If he cleared away the sand and uncovered its buried body, it would make sure he would one day become ruler of Egypt. When the prince woke up, he was shaken by the experience, but he did not ignore it. He gathered workers, organized a great effort, and began clearing the sand around the Sphinx. Over time, the statue was revealed again, slowly pulled out of the desert that had been swallowing it for years. And according to the story, just as the dream promised, Thutmose eventually became pharaoh. To honor that moment, he ordered the dream stele to be carved. It was meant to tell the world that his rise to power was connected to divine approval. The stone was placed right between the paws of the Sphinx, almost like a public message carved into history. But here is where things start to feel a little more complicated. Because if you look closely at the artwork on the upper part of the stele, there is a detail that does not fit neatly into the usual explanation. Instead of showing just one sphinx, the carving appears to show two. One figure is facing one direction, while another is placed directly behind it, facing the opposite way. One looks toward the east, where the sun rises each morning. The other looks toward the west, where the sun disappears at the end of the day. It creates a mirrored balance, like two guardians standing back to back, watching opposite horizons. For some researchers, this detail raises an interesting possibility. Was this simply artistic balance, or could it be reflecting something real about how the site was originally designed? The mystery becomes even stronger when you consider the condition of the surrounding stone. At the base of the Sphinx enclosure, there is a large carved surface that once held important detail, but today it is heavily worn. Parts of it are chipped away, others are faded beyond recognition, and much of the original surface is difficult to read. Most archaeologists explain this in a simple way. They say it is the result of time, wind, and sand slowly eroding the stone over thousands of years. In a desert environment like Giza, that kind of damage is expected. Nothing about it is considered unusual on its own, but not everyone is fully satisfied with that explanation. Some researchers have suggested another possibility, one that is more controversial. They wonder if the missing or damaged sections might not only be the result of natural erosion, but also human interference at some point in history. According to this idea, the original surface may have contained more than just decorative images. It could have held instructions, diagrams, or symbolic directions related to the layout of the entire site. If that were true, then the damaged lower section might have once pointed towards something important, possibly even marking the position of another structure aligned in the opposite direction. Some scholars push back against this interpretation. They argue that there is no confirmed evidence that anything was intentionally removed or erased. They also point out that ancient Egyptian art often used mirrored figures for symbolic balance, not hidden meaning. Two sphinxes facing opposite directions could simply reflect artistic style, not a buried architectural clue. Still, the debate refuses to settle, mainly because Giza continues to raise more questions than it answers. The more people study it, the more patterns seem to appear, even when those patterns are not officially confirmed. And so, the site remains caught between two interpretations. One sees natural weathering, symbolism, and myth. The other sees the possibility of a deeper design that may once have been recorded more clearly, before time, sand, and history blurred the original message. The 10-story blind spot. If the ancient builders truly designed symbols of twin guardians across the Giza Plateau, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. How could something meant to match the Great Sphinx simply disappear without leaving a clear trace in plain sight? The answer may not be about disappearance at all, but about what the desert slowly does over time when no one is watching closely enough. At first glance, the Giza Plateau looks fixed and unchanging. The sand appears still, the stone structures feel permanent, and it is easy to assume the landscape has always been this way. But the desert is not a frozen picture. It is an active environment shaped by wind, pressure, and time. Across thousands of years, strong desert winds sweep across North Africa, carrying fine sand particles across long distances. When these winds meet large stone structures, they lose speed, and the sand begins to settle. Layer after layer, the ground can rise without warning. This is not just theory. The Great Sphinx itself proves it. Over its long history, it has been buried so deeply by drifting sand that only its upper body remained visible at times. Ancient records and later excavations show that people had to repeatedly uncover it, digging it out again and again just to bring its face back into view. Without that effort, the Sphinx would have remained hidden beneath the desert surface, completely lost to time. Now imagine a structure that never received that kind of rescue. Just a short distance from the visible Sphinx stands a massive, uneven hill that rises sharply from the desert floor. It reaches about 108 feet into the air, roughly the height of a 10-story building. From a distance, it blends into the landscape so naturally that most visitors do not even question it. It looks like part of the original terrain, something the desert simply left behind. For many years, this mound was treated as nothing more than natural geology. Some experts believed it was leftover limestone bedrock that the ancient builders chose not to remove. In that view, the pyramids and surrounding structures were simply built around an inconvenient rock formation. Because of that assumption, the mound was never seriously investigated. It remained untouched, a quiet feature in a heavily studied landscape. But when modern imaging tools finally examined its internal structure, the picture began to shift. Natural hills tend to have consistent layers of solid rock that match the surrounding ground. They are compact, stable, and uniform from top to base. This mound, however, did not behave like that. The internal scans revealed something far less orderly. Instead of solid stone, the core showed a mixture of loose sand, crushed fragments, and tightly packed debris arranged in irregular layers.
It's suspected to be around about 100 feet below the sand because for a long time, Great Sphinx as we see it today was buried under a lot of sand.
That discovery changed the interpretation completely. A natural formation does not usually look like a compressed mixture of transported material. The structure appeared more like something that had been deliberately built, layer by layer, rather than formed by geological pressure alone. In other words, it began to look less like a hill and more like a construction. If that is true, then the question shifts from what it is to why it was made. Moving and stacking a 10-story mass of sand and rubble is not a small task, even with modern machinery. For an ancient civilization to do it by hand would require purpose, planning, and time. It suggests intention, not accident. And when its position is compared with the broader geometry of Giza, the mystery deepens again. The mound does not sit randomly in the landscape. It occupies a position that fits into the same strange alignment patterns already seen across the plateau, as if it were placed to complete something that was never fully revealed above the surface. The ultimate mirror trick. You see, the 10-story sand hill at Giza has been causing a lot of debate, and the reason becomes clearer when you look at the whole plateau like one big puzzle that was placed very carefully on the ground. Nothing about this place feels random when you really pay attention. The people who built ancient Egypt's structures treated land like something very serious, almost like a drawing board where every line had meaning. As a result, every pyramid, temple, and walkway sits in a position that feels planned rather than guessed. Even modern engineers still find it hard to ignore how accurate some of these placements are. The land was not used carelessly at all. Instead, it looks like it was measured and aligned with great care. And that already changes how we see everything here. When the full layout is mapped, the pattern becomes even clearer. The pyramids line up with very precise directions, matching north, south, east, and west almost perfectly. On top of this, many of the structures seem to follow patterns linked to the movement of the sun during the day and even the position of stars at night. So instead of just being a burial ground, the entire space starts to feel like it carries a deeper message. As you move closer into the site, one detail becomes hard to ignore. A long stone pathway runs straight from the base of the second largest pyramid, and this path does not bend or shift even slightly. It cuts through the desert like a clean line drawn with a ruler. At the far end of this path sits the Great Sphinx, a massive limestone figure that has been watching over Giza for thousands of years, while facing the direction of the rising sun in the east. This is where the story begins to feel less like familiar history and more like something unusual. A research team decided to take the entire Giza layout and place it into a digital model so they could study it more closely. They marked every major structure using exact coordinates and then started testing patterns that are not easy to notice just by standing on the ground. One of the first tests they ran involved drawing a straight central line through the main pyramid pathway. This line split the entire area into two equal sides, almost like folding a map in half. After that, they extended the same distance on the opposite side of the line, just to see if anything important lined up with the position of the Sphinx. When the model finished calculating, the result was surprising. The point on the opposite side did not fall on random sand or empty desert space. Instead, it landed directly on top of that 10-story sand mound that has confused researchers for years. The alignment was not slightly off or close enough to ignore. It matched with a level of precision that felt hard to dismiss, almost like the land itself was designed to mirror both sides equally. At this point, the idea of coincidence starts to feel less convincing. If there was ever a plan for a second Sphinx, one meant to balance the first, then this mound is exactly where it would sit. The position, distance, and direction all seem to reflect the visible Sphinx, almost like both sides were meant to work together as a matched pair guarding the entrance to the pyramids. This is where an old artifact called the Dream Stele becomes interesting again. It is a damaged stone slab found near the Sphinx, and for a long time, it was mostly seen as a simple story about a prince and a dream. But on the upper part of the carving, there are faint images that some people interpret as two lion-like figures sitting back to back.
Have you ever heard of the Dream Stele? It is a massive granite slab standing in front of the Sphinx. On its face is a carving of two sphinxes. Not one sphinx, but two.
For many years, this was treated as symbolic art. But when placed alongside this mirror pattern, some researchers see it differently. The visible Sphinx faces east toward the sunrise, which in ancient Egyptian belief represents renewal and new life. If this mirror idea has any truth, then the hidden mound would sit perfectly on the western side, facing the sunset. That would create a balance between morning and evening, life and ending, rising and fading, all held in one complete design. As researchers pushed digital mapping even further, the pattern did not stop at the surface. The alignment seemed to continue downward into the bedrock below the plateau. This suggests that whatever guided the layout of Giza may not have been limited to what we can see above ground. Instead, it may have extended deeper into hidden layers that are still not fully understood today. The ghost town of Giza. To really understand why this idea of a hidden twin monument even exists in the first place, we have to go back to the people who actually built Giza. For a long time, movies and old history books painted a very simple picture, where the pyramids were built by slaves dragged across the desert under harsh punishment and endless heat. It is a story that stuck for years, but once archaeologists started digging near the pyramids themselves, what they found did not really match that version of events. Not far from the monuments, they uncovered something far more organized than anyone expected. It was not a temporary camp or scattered shelters, but a proper ancient city now known as Hayt el Ghurab. This place had streets, housing areas, work zones, and storage spaces all arranged in a way that shows careful planning. At its peak, it may have supported around 20,000 people, most of them directly connected to building the pyramids and other structures at Giza. What surprised researchers even more was the evidence of how these workers lived. When they studied animal remains from the site, they found large amounts of cattle, sheep, and goat bones, which suggests the workers were regularly fed proper meals, not just scraps. There were also bakeries large enough to serve thousands of people, along with areas that looked like medical spaces and organized housing. Instead of a miserable camp, this looks more like a fully functioning community built to support a huge national project. For a while, everything about this city seemed to show steady progress. Stone was being cut, transported, and shaped with purpose, and the entire system looked like it was running with clear structure. But as archaeologists went deeper into the layers of the site, they began to notice something that changed the tone of the story completely. At some point, the activity in the city seems to stop in a way that does not look slow or natural. It is not like the settlement slowly faded away over time. Instead, the evidence suggests that daily life was interrupted while people were still in the middle of their routines. In some homes, meals were found left behind, almost as if someone had stood up and walked away without finishing. Copper tools, which were valuable and not easily replaced, were discovered lying exactly where they had been dropped. In other areas, bakeries still held containers of dough that had not been baked, as if the work had been stopped halfway through. There is something unsettling about that kind of pattern. It does not look like a planned evacuation where everything is packed and cleaned. It looks more like a place where people left in a hurry, without taking the time to finish what they were doing or gather what they had worked so hard to build. And over the years that followed, wind and sand slowly filled the empty spaces, covering walls, burying rooms, and eventually swallowing the city piece by piece until it disappeared from sight. This sudden break in activity is where things start to connect with something even more unusual. Some researchers believe that the abandonment of Hayt el Gharab may not have been an isolated event. Instead, they suggest it could be linked to something larger happening across the Giza Plateau, something that might also explain why certain structures appear unfinished or hidden beneath the surface. That is where the idea of a larger design starts to come in, especially the possibility that Giza was not only built across the surface, but also arranged in ways that extend below it. If the builders were careful enough to align pyramids and monuments so precisely above ground, it raises a natural question about whether the same level of planning might continue underground as well, in places that have not been fully explored. If this idea holds even a measure of truth, then the Giza Plateau may represent only part of a much larger design. The pyramids and surrounding monuments could be the visible remains of a project that was carefully planned, but never fully completed, uncovered, or understood. This possibility encourages a different way of viewing the entire site. Instead of seeing the structures as isolated monuments, it suggests they may be connected to a broader plan hidden beneath the surface. If so, what appears above the sand today could be only the most visible portion of a far deeper and more complex undertaking. And this brings everything down to a final thought that is hard to shake off once it settles in your mind. If Giza really was designed as part of a larger system, and if parts of it are still hidden beneath the ground, then what else could still be sitting there, waiting quietly under the desert, completely unseen all this time? Do you also think a second Sphinx is waiting under the sand? Or is the radar just catching an optical illusion? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.